Stay back. The Belgian Malinois had come through the service entrance like something built for disaster. 90 pounds of muscle and velocity, collar but no leash. Black muzzle drawn tight with tension. 3 line cooks backed against the prep stations. One knocked over a mixing bowl. The crash made the dog flinch, and flinching made it more dangerous. Nola Prescott set down her spreadsheet printouts, stepped out from behind the supply closet door, and walked directly toward the dog. Nobody move. Her voice stayed flat. Don't look at him. Don't yell. She crouched 6 feet from the Malinois and turned slightly sideways, not meeting its eyes, making herself small in the only way that actually mattered. The dog was breathing in short bursts. Its hindquarters trembled. Not aggression, overload. Something had frightened it, and being surrounded by more terrified people was making it worse. Nola had spent 2 years volunteering at a dog rescue before the bookkeeping work started eating her weekends. She knew the difference between a dog ready to attack and a dog trying desperately not to. She held out her hand, palm down, and waited. The Malinois stared at her. Then, very slowly, it moved closer. It was sniffing her wrist when the back door opened again. 4 men in dark clothing entered first. Then a 5th, the dog's body went rigid, but it didn't move away from Nola. The man who entered last was the reason restaurants fell silent and phone calls ended abruptly. Nola didn't know his face, the way people who moved in certain circles knew his face. She knew his name because she reconciled Santino's accounts every Monday and had long ago accepted that some columns she simply didn't ask about. Tavian Wolf was not what she'd expected when she pictured a man who ran most of the eastern waterfront alongside 3 separate construction fronts. He was younger looking in person, quieter, the kind of stillness that didn't announce itself but made every other person in the room seem slightly too loud. His eyes moved to the dog first. Cypher, the command was clean and calm. Come. Cypher looked at him. Then Cypher sat down squarely on Nola's left foot. The silence in Santino's kitchen achieved something close to a physical weight. One of Wolf's men shifted. Another cleared his throat. Tavian's expression didn't change, exactly, but something behind it did. The faint recalibration of a man encountering a problem that shouldn't exist. Cypher. Again, the same tone, the same authority that presumably moved hundreds of people without effort. Cypher pressed harder against Nola's leg. Nola looked up at Tavian Wolf. He was already looking at her with an expression she recognized as a question being asked through teeth that didn't open. He's not refusing you, she said. He's overwhelmed. There's a difference. Tavian's gaze sharpened. He's a trained protection animal. He's also a living thing having a bad afternoon. She glanced at Cypher, then back. Whatever happened before he got here, it was too much. He needs a few minutes where nobody expects anything from him. He has an entire training regimen designed to prevent exactly this. And yet, she gestured slightly at the dog currently sitting on her foot. One of the line cooks made a small noise. Tavian looked at the kitchen staff. Out, he said. 1 word. They were gone in 11 seconds. Nola noted this without comment. Could your men step back, she asked. Not out, just further. Tavian's attention returned to her. She waited while he decided whether to find that insulting. He gave a small nod. All 4 men retreated to the far side of the kitchen without a sound. The room got quieter. Nola stayed low and let Cypher decide what to do with the new space. The dog's breathing slowed. The trembling in his hind quarters stopped. He turned once, sniffed the hem of her cardigan, then laid his chin across her knee with the absolute conviction of a creature that had found the only safe place in the room. Tavian watched. He's not broken, Nola said. He just needed somewhere to put it down for a minute. Tavian crouched. He didn't reach toward Cypher. She noticed that, just settled into a patient position several feet away and waited. Cypher lifted his head after a moment, studied him, and then stood. He crossed to Tavian and pressed against his leg. Tavian put one hand against the dog's flank. Something in his shoulders eased by a degree so small most people wouldn't have caught it. Nola caught it. There was nothing fearful in Cypher around Tavian. The dog leaned into him the way a tired person leans into something they trust completely. Whatever the crisis had been, it hadn't broken the bond. It had just temporarily exceeded what Cypher knew how to carry. Tavian looked across the dog's back at Nola. She stood, brushed flour dust from her cardigan, the hazard of sharing an office adjacent to a working kitchen, and picked up her spreadsheets. "He's fine," she said. "Probably just needs some quiet tonight." Tavian held her gaze for a moment. "You work here?" Not a question. He clearly knew exactly who worked where in every business connected to his name. "Bookkeeping," she said. "Back office. I mostly don't come out." He looked at her as if cataloguing something he hadn't planned to catalogue. Then he left. Cypher walked beside him without hesitation, as if nothing unusual had happened. Nola returned to her desk, sat down, and stared at her spreadsheet for 45 seconds without reading a single number. She had expected that to be the end of it. 2 days later, Tavian Wolf appeared in the doorway of her office. Cypher was with him. The dog walked directly to the corner, where Nola's spare umbrella leaned against the wall, sniffed it with professional thoroughness, and settled beside her chair as if completing a scheduled inspection. Nola looked at Tavian. Tavian looked at the dog. "He won't go into the East Garden anymore." He said this the way most people report a structural malfunction. "He stands at the entrance and won't proceed." Nola set down her pen. "What happened in the East Garden recently?" "Nothing." "Noise? New people? Something moved?" A pause. "Landscapers came through on Tuesday, gas-powered trimmer." That kind of equipment runs at a frequency that bothers dogs with sensitive hearing. It doesn't mean anything is wrong with him. He's just connected that space to a sound he didn't like. She picked her pen back up. "Take him through at a different time of day. Bring something he likes. Let him set the pace." Tavian looked at her. "That's it?" "That's it." He stood there another few seconds, as if the simplicity of the solution was itself suspicious. Then he called Cypher and left. Nola waited until she heard the car door close before she allowed herself to exhale. He came back 6 days after that. Cypher had stopped eating his evening meal with the same enthusiasm. 4 days after that, the dog seemed reluctant to get into a particular vehicle. Then, he kept redirecting walks toward the same block despite correction. Each time, Nola listened. Each time, the explanation took about 3 minutes. Each time, Tavian Wolf stayed considerably longer than 3 minutes. He had a habit of positioning himself where he could see both the office door and the hallway window without appearing to. She noticed it on the second visit and understood it by the third. The man was not capable of sitting in a room without accounting for every exit. He probably couldn't name the last time he'd simply existed somewhere without monitoring it. She didn't point this out. By the 4th visit, Cypher had stopped pretending there was a reason and simply went to his corner, turned twice, and lay down. Nola had started keeping a small water bowl behind her filing cabinet. She told herself this was practical. "Does he have time where nobody asks anything of him?" she said one afternoon, not looking up from her monitor. Tavian, who had been answering messages near the window, looked over. "He has scheduled rest periods." "That's not what I asked." A pause. "What did you ask?" "Does he have time that isn't scheduled, that isn't structured around the next task?" She finally looked up. "Time that's genuinely his." Tavian didn't answer immediately. "He has the best care money provides." "I believe you. I'm asking something different." The silence carried a particular quality. Nola had grown up around quiet men, her father, her grandfather, and she had learned to read the difference between men who had nothing to say and men who had something they didn't yet know how to say. She returned to her screen. Cypher's tail moved once against the floor. "What does that look like?" Tavian said finally. "Time that's his." Nola thought about it. Something pointless, something he chooses himself, a smell he investigates for no reason, a toy nobody gave him on a schedule. She paused. Something he gets to be bad at. Tavian looked at his dog. Cypher had found a pen that had rolled under the filing cabinet and was nudging it with his nose in a pattern that had no apparent purpose. "That," Nola said, "is him being off duty." Tavian watched. Something shifted in his expression that he covered quickly, but not quite quickly enough. After that visit, things changed in small ways. Cypher started arriving with a slightly different energy, less vigilance, more curiosity. He began bringing objects to Nola and placing them at her feet with great ceremony, as though delivering important reports. A pen cap, a folded receipt, once a rubber band. She accepted each one with appropriate gravity. Tavian started staying later, first while Cypher settled, then while he slept, then simply because the conversation had not yet run out. She learned he took his coffee black, that he was constitutionally incapable of being late for anything, and that his dry humor surfaced only when he'd forgotten to contain it. He learned which accounts made her frown, why she kept a paper filing system alongside the digital one, and that she chewed her pen cap when she was working through something she hadn't solved yet. Neither of them acknowledged how much they were accumulating. Reed from Callaway Food Supply came by on Thursdays. He had known Nola for 3 years, since she'd started at Santino's, and he had a habit of bringing 2 coffees because he claimed she was reliably terrible at feeding herself during tax season, and arguably not much better the rest of the year. Cypher noticed him before Nola looked up. The Malinois lifted his head, assessed Reed with professional efficiency, apparently concluded he was acceptable, and went back to sleep. Reed scratched behind Cypher's ears on the way past. Cypher accepted this without getting up, which was the highest compliment a tired protection dog could offer a stranger. "New office mascot?" Reed set 1 coffee on the corner of her desk. "Recurring visitor," she said. "His owner comes to ask me questions. About bookkeeping. About dogs." Reed looked at Cypher. "I'm going to assume the owner isn't someone I ask follow-up questions about." Safe assumption. Tavian appeared in the doorway 3 minutes later. His eyes went to Reed, then to the 2 coffees, then to Cypher, who had shifted to press against Reed's leg while Reed crouched to examine something near the baseboard. Tavian's expression didn't change. That was somehow the most expressive it had ever been. "This is Reed," Nola said, "supply rep. He brings coffee because he insists I have a poor relationship with basic nutrition." "She does," Reed confirmed, standing. He extended a hand. Tavian shook it. 1 pump. Professional. Final. "I'll leave you to it," Reed said easily. He touched the brim of an imaginary hat at Nola, a running joke between them that would take 4 minutes to explain, and left. Cypher watched him go, then looked at Tavian, then settled back down. Tavian stood near the window. His phone was in his hand, but he wasn't looking at it. "He brings you coffee often," he said. "Occasionally." How often is occasionally? Nola looked at him over the rim of her cup. "Are you asking because you want to know, or because you're trying to make something out of it?" "I'm asking because Reed from Callaway Food Supply apparently knows how you take your coffee. 2% milk, 1 sugar. It's not classified information." Tavian said nothing. Cypher yawned. "He's a friend," Nola said. "He's been a friend for 3 years. That's all." The tension around Tavian's jaw released slightly. He came to sit, actually sit, which was still unusual enough to register, in the chair across from her desk. The following week, Nola arrived to find a bag from Broder's on her desk. Broder's was a restaurant she had mentioned once, in passing, as having the best soup in the city. A coffee sat beside it, labeled in handwriting she didn't recognize. She did not ask who had arranged it. She also noted that Tavian arrived 20 minutes later than usual that morning and appeared to be waiting for some kind of acknowledgement. She thanked him for the soup, with the same tone she used when thanking the mail carrier for packages. This was not quite the acknowledgement he'd been waiting for. Cypher, for his part, looked at Tavian with the expression of a dog who found the entire situation deeply obvious. The Wolf Group held its annual charitable foundation dinner in October. Santino's was listed among the recognized business partners. Nola almost didn't go. She owned one dress appropriate for an event like this, a navy shift bought for a cousin's wedding 2 years ago, worn precisely once since. She was aware, walking into Meridian Hall, that she looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had dressed carefully for something outside her usual territory. This bothered her less than the fact that it seemed to bother several people in the room. Tavian was already there. He moved through the crowd the way water moves through existing space, without friction, without effort. People adjusted their positions when he approached, without appearing to notice they were doing it. She watched 2 conversations end and 2 others begin simply because of his proximity. He saw her from across the room. Something changed in his expression that she didn't have a name for yet. A woman named Vivica Strand found Nola first. Vivica was the kind of polished that required maintenance and a staff. She smiled at Nola with the particular warmth of someone who had already decided she wasn't a threat, and could therefore afford to be generous. "You're from Santino's," Vivica said. "You handle their books." "I own the bookkeeping practice," Nola said. "Santino's is one of my clients." "Of course." The correction landed without purchase. Vivica was already scanning the room. It's wonderful how Tavian supports the local operators. Later, she introduced Nola to a foundation director as one of the restaurant bookkeepers. To a city councilman's wife as the girl who does accounts for one of Tavian's places. The word girl was deployed with surgical pleasantness. Each introduction was gracious. Each one erased something. Nola absorbed the first 2 with a fixed smile and the steady internal accounting of a woman who had learned to document things carefully before deciding what to do about them. The third time, in the middle of a group conversation about community partnerships, Vivica said lightly that sometimes access simply came down to knowing whose inner circle to work your way into. A few people produced the polite laugh of those who weren't entirely sure they were supposed to. Nola Prescott runs Prescott Financial Services. Tavian's voice came from slightly behind her right shoulder. She hadn't heard him approach. She manages accounts for 11 businesses in this district. The foundation's partnership with Santino's exists because her documentation of their community kitchen program is what brought them to our attention. The group went quiet. Vivica smiled without adjusting it. "Of course, I only meant." "What does Prescott Financial's client base look like?" Tavian asked. He was looking at one of the foundation directors now, not at Vivica. The director recovered quickly and gave a creditable summary. That was all. No scene, no threat, no raised voice. The correction was delivered like a document filed correctly after being misfiled. Simple, accurate, irrefutable. Nola stood in the silence that followed and felt something complex move through her. Later, she found Tavian near the edge of the room. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." She looked at him. "I could have handled Vivica." "I know. I waited until you'd established what needed to be established." He paused. What she was doing after that was something different. She was rewriting the record. I wasn't going to let that stand. Nola looked away toward the crowd. Your world changes what everything means. A client becomes an access point. A woman standing near you becomes a story other people feel entitled to explain. He didn't answer immediately. That's true, he said finally, and it doesn't have a simple solution. She appreciated that he didn't offer her one anyway. But walking back to her car that night, Nola admitted to herself that the question was no longer whether she liked Tavian Wolf. She had stopped pretending otherwise, somewhere around the fourth Thursday, when Cypher had deliberately placed a rubber band on her keyboard while she was on a call, and Tavian had watched the whole sequence with something close to pride. The question was what it would cost her to exist in his proximity. Whether the woman who had built a practice no one had handed her would eventually become, in every room she entered, simply the woman standing next to someone more powerful. She had worked too hard for a story she didn't choose. 3 weeks after the Foundation dinner, she told him what she'd been thinking. Not in those words, she said it practically. Cypher doesn't need to keep coming here. Tavian looked up from his phone. He's doing well, she said. Better rest. More unstructured time. Whatever set him off before, that's past. He's balanced. She kept her voice even. There's no professional reason to keep bringing him. Tavian held her gaze, understood. No argument, no leveraged excuse to continue. He called Cypher, who got up from his corner with the reluctance of a dog who had opinions about the decision, and they left. He didn't come back the next day, or the day after, or the day after that. Santino's was Santino's again. Her office was her office. The water bowl behind the filing cabinet was the only evidence anything had been different. Nola discovered she disliked Normal considerably more than she'd expected. She missed the sound of Cypher investigating the hall closet. She missed pen caps appearing on her desk, like diplomatic communiques. She missed Tavian standing where he could see the exits, while pretending he was simply reading his messages. She even missed the afternoon he had stood silently near the window for 6 full minutes. Because Reed had been in the building and had emerged from the service corridor, carrying a box of pasta, before Tavian understood the context. Reed noticed the change in her. He had the good sense not to ask. 3 weeks became 4. Across the city, Tavian was having a different problem. Cypher was fine. Objectively, this was excellent news. He ate, he slept. He performed his work with the quiet competence he'd been trained to provide. By every measurable standard, he was a well-adjusted, professionally sound protection animal. He did not bring Tavian pen caps. He did not settle in any particular corner with the air of someone who had arrived at the right place. He performed. He did not simply exist. Tavian had spent 4 weeks categorizing why he'd kept going to Santino's. The first time had been about the dog. The second and third had still been about the dog. By the 4th visit, it had been technically possible to claim it was about the dog. By the 10th, he had been claiming this only to himself, and without conviction. He knew how to negotiate in bad faith. He had never been particularly comfortable doing it with himself. He also knew what it meant when a man who had not left anything to chance in 15 years found himself asking a driver to stop at a specific restaurant because someone had mentioned, in passing exactly once, that they had good soup. 5 weeks after his last visit, Tavian walked into Santino's on a Tuesday at 11 in the morning, without Cypher. Nola looked up from her desk. Her eyes went immediately to the space behind him. Where's your dog? At home. She set down her pen. Is something wrong? No. Eating normally? Yes. Restless? No. She waited. Tavian stood in the doorway of her small back office without a leash in his hand, without a behavioral question prepared, without any of the structure he had built their previous 30-something conversations around. For a man who could redirect the attention of an entire room with a glance, the answer appeared genuinely difficult. Then why are you here? She asked. I wanted to see you. Nola was quiet. I spent 5 weeks looking for a way to say that differently, he said. There isn't one. She looked at him for a moment. The almost smile she was controlling showed in her eyes before she let it reach her mouth. So this isn't about Cypher? No. You're certain? Because he could develop a very serious issue with his evening walks. Something shifted in Tavian's expression. Nola. She let him wait 4 more seconds, then, what exactly do you want? He understood what she was doing. This time there was no dog between them. No professional framing, no room for ambiguity. I want to have dinner with you. She raised an eyebrow. He looked at her steadily. A man who had given commands for so long that asking felt like learning a different grammar. And then, with the deliberate effort of someone who was choosing this. Nola Prescott, would you have dinner with me? Yes, she said. Something in him eased visibly, enough that she could see it, and he didn't try to hide it. She noticed. He noticed that she noticed. Neither of them said anything about it. 4 months later, on a Wednesday, Cypher came through Santino's service entrance the same way he had the first time, with conviction, velocity, and a specific destination already decided. He went directly past Tavian, down the hall, around the corner, and into Nola's office. He turned twice. He lay down. Tavian appeared in the doorway 30 seconds behind him. He was supposed to be walking beside me, he said. I know. Nola was already reaching down to scratch behind Cypher's ears. This is how we met. He sat on your foot. You told him to move. You told me I was doing it wrong. You were. She looked up at him. You still stand where you can see the exits. Force of habit. He came to sit across from her desk, which he did easily now, without the performance of having somewhere else to be, and set his phone face down. Cypher's tail moved once, then twice, then with the slow, steady momentum of a dog who had been patient long enough and felt no need to apologize for it. Nola looked from Cypher to Tavian and back again. He chose you first, Tavian said quietly, before I understood what that meant. He knew where he wanted to be, she said. You just took longer to figure out the same thing. Cypher lifted his head, looked at Tavian with an expression that managed to convey both deep loyalty and a complete absence of remorse, and then settled his chin back onto Nola's shoe. Tavian looked at his dog, then at the woman who had never moved to make room for him, only made space, which was a different thing entirely, and who had built every piece of her life with her own hands and intended to keep doing so, with or without him. He had come in the beginning because Cypher needed her, then because Cypher wanted to be there, then for a long time because Cypher had given him a reason not to have to say the real one out loud. Cypher had known from that first afternoon in Santino's kitchen exactly what he was doing. Tavian had just needed longer to walk through the door without him.